Hello, greetings. My name is Jeremiah Henry, and I'm a lecturer with the English department at California State University, Fresno. And I'd like to share with you one of my learning plans that have been scaffolded by 5E. That is, engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate. Before I get into the components of the learning plan, there's a little bit of meta commentary I'd like to share with you. First of all, you should know this is not a live class, but this is a revised lesson, or as I like to call, learning plan, from one that I did about 2 weeks ago as of the recording of this video on May the 7th, 2021. And in order to kind of simulate or replicate being in a live classroom, but while also offering my commentary to fill in the blanks, I will comment over here in the left audio channel. So if you're listening with headphones or you have two speakers, you should hear me more on the left when I am offering commentary. And you should hear me more in the center channel when I'm speaking as though I were the teacher to my students. So I decided to present a full plan scaffolded with all 5 parts of 5E, with emphasis on the engage and the explore components, which I think mark the most significant changes from my original plan. So with all of that being said then, let's go ahead and have a look at my learning plan for So What, Who Cares, Saying Why It Matters. Alrighty, everybody. So here's our overview for today. We are going to continue our work in exploring powerful language practices for self-expression through writing. And it turns out that chapter 7 from They Say, I Say, subtitled So What, Who Cares, Saying Why It Matters, might offer us some tools to help us increase our power with language. There's a couple of things that we're going to be doing with this. First of all, I'd like us to play with some ideas concerning the hook in writing. I know that most of us have heard about and have probably practiced having some kind of a hook in our writing. So I'm wanting us to kind of think about that and remember some of the things that we've done with the hook in the past. Then we're going to consult with Gerald Graff and Kathy Birkenstein. That's of course, the authors for They Say, I Say. And we're going to read through some of that chapter's content together. Then we'll reflect on some of the new ideas that we get out of that chapter. And then we'll just take some guesses and estimate how these new ideas might be helpful in our current writing project. So that's what we're going to be up to today. What you need to have access to in order to be successful, just create a space for yourself to take some notes and get yourself access to the textbook. Okay, so now we'd be moving into the engage phase of the lesson plan. And some of the questions I had in mind when developing my classroom questions are things like, have they encountered this before? What do they remember? And then can we make it relevant to the present time? Okay, let's start with the very idea of the hook. And I'm curious to know, do you agree or do you disagree with this statement? Part of writing effectively means engaging your audience with some kind of hook. Yeah, there are a variety of tools that I could use in order to gauge this response. I'm thinking of using the polling feature on Zoom. I might, in a face-to-face class, use an app like Socrative, right? Some kind of an instant feedback sort of system to collect this polling data. Typically, I think most students would agree, and they would access some of their prior knowledges that, yes, we need to have a hook in our writing in order for that writing to be effective. But then we're going to dig a little bit deeper. So, why is it that we've learned about this idea of a hook in the past, and why might it be important for us to have a hook in our writing to engage our audience? So, I'd like for us to explore this in writing for just about a minute or so. So, go ahead and you're just going to write this to yourself. This isn't something that you're going to turn in, but I would, as you are willing and able, love to hear your thoughts on this. So be prepared to share what you come up with in the Zoom chat. Okay, and here we'd give space to reflect and ponder and do some writing. Some typical responses from my students are things like, well, the hook keeps people reading, so that's why we should have one. That's why it's effective. It makes them interested in what you have to say, right? These kinds of things. And this is going to help us move into the explore phase. So we've worked a little bit at accessing prior knowledges. We've looked at how this might be relevant, how this might be an effective or powerful language practice. We're going to explore it a little bit more deeply. Some of the questions that I used to come up with my targeted questions for my students are things like, what has worked before, what hasn't worked before, and then what about new expertise? What about some new ideas that we can take a look at? So we have some sense of why we use hooks in writing, but I'm wondering, what kind of experience you have with trying hooks out in the past. What are some specific ways that you've tried before to engage your readers in your writing? What kinds of strategies have you used? So let's take another minute to do some writing on this, and then we're going to pair up in breakout rooms and share some of our thinking with each other. Right. So let's write for a minute, and then I'll open up the breakout rooms, and then you can bounce some ideas off of each other for about a minute or two. And there we go. Got a little bit ahead of myself on the slides, but you get the idea. Okay, so let's collaborate a little bit and share with each other some of the ideas that we already have for engaging our readers' interests in our writing. How might we do this? How might we hook our readers in to what we want to share and express? So here students would share their ideas, and some of these responses might be, things and strategies they've learned in the past. Some typical things might be share a personal story in your introduction, or start with a surprising quote or fact. Start out by asking a question, and then you wait to answer that question in your conclusion. Right? Those sorts of things, typical student responses. And in all fairness, those are effective strategies to hook and engage interest. Okay, so all good ideas so far, for sure, but let's see if we can expand our toolkit a little bit. Let's dig a little bit deeper with what Gerald Graff and Kathy Birkenstein have to say in chapter 7 of our textbook, right? So let's take a look and see some of their ideas about how we can hook our readers' interests. And don't be surprised if some of these ideas are brand new to you, because I don't think that these are typically taught at the middle school or the high school level. So let's check out and read together and see what Graff and Birkenstein have to say. Hey, we're going to read to answer two questions. Number one, what do the so what and the who cares questions ask of us as writers? And the second question I want us to think about as we're reading, how can answering the so what and the who cares questions for our readers be a way of hooking their interests? Okay, let's try to be specific with that, right? So, what are these so what and who cares questions asking us to do as writers? And how does this relate to the notion of the hook, right? Of hooking our readers' interests. All right, at this point, we'd engage in a collaborative reading of the text, right? And this should, in my view, help us start to transition into the explain phase of the 5E scaffold. Um, One of my central questions in designing this part of the learning plan is, in light of some new ideas, what do my students think? All right, so now that we're a little bit more familiar with chapter 7 of They Say, I Say, let's go back to the questions that we used on the front end. What did the so what and who cares questions ask of us as writers? And how can answering these questions for our readers be a way of hooking their interests? So, we're going to spend maybe just a minute or two free writing on that and playing with that idea. And then we're going to spend a couple of minutes in breakout rooms to play with these questions and bounce some ideas off of each other. And then, of course, students would spend a few minutes in breakout rooms, or of course, in the phase or in this context of a face-to-face class, they'd partner up or get in a small group of 3 to 4 students, arrange themselves in a small group, and then have that discussion face-to-face. But in Zoom with the breakout rooms, it works just the same. And as we get back into the main room or come back together as a large class, then this is our opportunity to debrief. They can share with me, what kinds of connections that they're making with the new ideas from the text. And this provides fantastic opportunities for formative assessment. So in real time, I can respond to their ideas and give them some feedback. Plus, I'm getting a sense of what they're getting out of the reading. I believe then that this dovetails nicely into the elaborate phase of the 5E scaffold. A leading question that I use to help us get here is, how can we connect these old and new ideas to our current writing project? All right. So we have a great collection of ideas that you've already practiced. And I think we have a couple of great new ideas to work with. So let's just make some guesses or some estimates as to how we might use these ideas in our current practice, in our current essay project. Okay. And remember, we're working in the genre of reporting information and overall practicing the they say, I say approach to joining the conversation that we're reading about. So, how might answering the so what and who cares questions help us in our work on our essays? Right, same kind of deal here. I always like to give my students a few minutes to think and write, and then we'd pair and share, have a discussion, debrief. Then leads us to the final part of the 5E scaffold, evaluate. Here's my lead question. What did my students value about what they just learned? So I'm working at a question that's going to help them explore that. So, with everything that we've gone over today, I'm curious, what do you value? What was your favorite thing that you learned about reading, about your reading and writing practice today? And I also wonder what's still unclear that you might need to review. So let's spend a couple of minutes back in our notes and writing some more and think about these questions. Favorite thing you learned about your reading and writing practice today? And what might be unclear that you might need to go back and review? And finally, as the class comes to a close, another great opportunity for formative assessment. Also, an opportunity to field any additional questions or comments or concerns that my students might have about what we had gone over that day. So, overall, I think that the 5E scaffold is a great way to think about ways of organizing a learning plan so that the students can get the most out of it. I particularly like how, without even thinking about it, it 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 forces us in a good way. It forces us to engage in a more constructivist approach to learning plans. I mean, it's built into the system to have students access their prior knowledges, to reflect on their prior knowledges, and then to start to assimilate new information in relation to their prior knowledges. I think it's great, and I'm looking forward to continuing to generate lesson plans and revise previous lesson plans in light of this great framework.